to Before You Go, the official podcast of ABODE Contemplative Care for the Dying.
At ABODE, our vision is that we live in a world where death is not feared and we live fully until we die. And we'd like to make that happen before we go. I'm Mary Thorsby, ABODE's CEO.
I'm Natalie Buster, ABODE's end-of-life doula and yoga director. Welcome to Before You Go. Mary, how are ya?
I'm excellent, Natalie. How are you?
I'm good, but I gotta tell you, talking about death like I have been doing with you for these podcast episodes has really gotten me thinking a lot about my mom's death. And, there's some times when I think I could have done things differently. But then at the end of the day, I'm really happy with the way things went for her. I got to spend time with her before she was really sick. And so there were lots of opportunities for me to tell her how much she meant to me and how much I loved her. And it reminds me, for our contemplative moment today, of this beautiful Hawaiian prayer called Ho'oponopono.
Could you say that again?
Yes, Ho'oponopono. You just want me to practice that. Yes, I've been practicing it. But it's these four simple phrases that we can say to people before they go. But I also think it's a great idea to say these four phrases all the time to anyone who means anything to you. So I will say these four statements. The first one is, I'm sorry. And that was when I said that to my mom, like, whew, because we didn't get along all the time. We were very headstrong women, both of us. And I'm sure there were so many opportunities where I was not the nicest daughter to her. And so being able to say, I'm sorry was really meaningful. Please forgive me. Thank you. And I love you. And I remember reaching out to my friend Anne, who had lost her mother quite a few years ago, but she was the only person I knew at the time who had lost a mother. And I reached out to her. I said, what do? I don't know what to do. Help me. Kind of one of those emails. And she wrote these four phrases for me. And she said, this is what hospice recommends. This is what I've heard. This might bring you some peace. So I wanted to share that with you and with our listeners. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And I love you.
For listeners who may be visiting San Francisco, or perhaps you live there, if you go to the corner of California and Hyde, right across from Trader Joe's, there's a stencil on the sidewalk that says those very words. I did not put it there, I promise. I just happened to be walking there a couple of weeks ago, and I looked down across the street. I was like, oh, wow, there they are.
Oh, so it's universal, right? I mean, what great graffiti. I think all graffiti should be beautiful like that.
Should be all deathy.
All deathy. Yeah, all beautiful and deathy. Gosh, I love those phrases. And again, they're simple, right? They're simple phrases. It doesn't always mean that they're easy to say. So that's why I think we practice. Don't wait until the person you love is dying, although that's a great time to say it. Practice it now with the people that you love. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. So, thinking about my mom's death, I mentioned that it was, it was a pretty good death. I know that that's a weird statement. Like, what on earth is a good death? I mean, I know that I don't want a bad death. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. But a good death in that specific circumstance was that I got to spend time with her and I got to say those four statements. What do you think about when you hear a good death? What does that bring up for you?
I've been trying to study that a lot because every death is so different and people die on their own terms. In fact, what are we reading in yoga? How we live is how we die. I think having a good death, in my view, would be pain-free, surrounded by family and friends, wearing something cute so that I still look cute, even on my deathbed, I still have it. uh, Having my favorite music played, having the sounds, things I like to smell, flowers, all of that. But I also know that that may not happen. So while that may be my idea of a good death, I'm just as likely to have what some would consider a bad death. It's hard to make those calls on. I don't want anybody to feel judged on what their death entailed.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because who are we to say that this is a good death and I decree this is a bad death? That's not our job. But I think, we can think about what that might mean for us personally and finding the beauty in the death, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not what you intended or where you wanted to be, that it still can have some beauty and some tenderness in it. Because my mom, I mean, she was in the hospital. I'm sure she didn't want to die in a hospital. Maybe she did. She never told us, but she did die in a hospital, and she was hooked up to a bunch of machines. And it was challenging because she didn't look like how maybe I would have envisioned her having a good death. But what was beautiful is that once she got admitted to hospice, we were able to kind of turn off all the feeding machines and all of that. And my dad brought his guitar and we were able to sing songs to her. So we went through all of her favorite songs, some John Denver songs, some Harry Chapin songs, some Beatles songs. She really loved the 70s, music from the 70s. And just sing. And at one point, we were singing so loud that the hospital staff just really gently and with smiles on their face shut the door so that we could have our privacy and probably they could have a little peace and quiet on the ward. But we were all together. It was my sister and my dad and me, and we were surrounding my mom and singing songs. And then my sister and I left, and my dad stayed with her and just played songs for her, talked about their history together, where they met, their wedding day, the birth of their children, all of these monumental times in their life. And he was there for her last breath. And yes, did her body look peaceful? And was she like in the movies with this beautiful halo coming down on her? No, her body was not how it used to be. She had her mouth open. She was breathing. She had the apnea, kind of that fish out of water breathing. But it was a good death. I think that even though it wasn't perfect, I think that was a good death.
So a good death for her and also for you all.
Yeah, I think so. And I still think about it because I think it's the way it had to be. Because as we've learned, we don't always know when death is going to come. We don't always know how we're going to die, where we're going to die. And so making the most of whatever situation we're in. I think Alua Arthur, the celebrity death doula who came and helped us celebrate our 10-year anniversary at ABODE, she said it really nicely. It's the best, and I'm probably paraphrasing, but it's the best death you can have with the circumstances you're given.
Right, right. I think that's the only way it can be is where you are in the moment. And whatever plans you have, as long as you've shared those with your loved ones and those close to you, everyone will try to make those things happen to the best of their ability. But it's really up to us to be thinking about all that in advance and writing it down and making sure that if you want to hear the Beatles during your final days, that you tell someone so that they know to bring in Natalie and Natalie's dad, Jerry, to serenade with the Beatles that you all perform.
Yeah. Oh, we would love to do it. We'd be happy and proud. Yeah.
But yeah, good death, bad death. We've had some really difficult ones at Abode. We always talk about one of our guests, BJ. She came to us in a cranky mood and she left us in a cranky mood. She was a lovely, lovely woman, but there had been some things that I think that she struggled with and had some unfinished business. And so when her body was shutting down and she was actively dying, it was not a peaceful, quiet death like what my mother had and what your mother had and what most folks at Abode have. She went down with a fight. She fought it and fought it and fought it, and it was hard on her and it was hard on us. Would you call that a bad death? And for a long time, I thought, yeah, I would. But then, thinking about this topic, I thought, well, she didn't go down without a fight. So maybe that was her feistiness that to her, that was just the way she's wired, and she wasn't going to leave without putting up a fuss. So why is that bad? I mean, who am I to say that was bad? It was uncomfortable, but to us, but it's not our death. It's the dying person's death.
Yeah, and maybe that was in your like you said, that was a good death for her, and it just shows me that what is a good death for one person may not be a good death for another and vice versa. But I like what you said too, Mary, because even though we don't know when death is coming and we don't know how we'll die or where, when, we can still plan. And to the best of our ability, we can make sure that our wishes are known to our loved ones to ensure that as good of a death as the circumstances allow can happen. And I'm curious, like for you, you talked about what you envision your death to be and what you would like. How do you get from that vision to the reality? I know that's like, 50 years away, of course, but
I'm counting on 30, at least 32.
32 years. Okay, in 32 years, how do you take this dream to some kind of reality?
Well, what I would do is I would connect with an end of life doula, for example, one of our abode doulas, but there are wonderful end of life doulas, also known as death doulas or death midwives, all over the country, all over the world. It's such a beautiful profession. And I would work with that person to map out exactly every detail, just as if I'm producing an event, which I am. It's the ultimate party, the after party, so to speak. I would write down, what I'm going to wear, who's going to be in the room with me, what kind of flowers I want, what kind of music I want to listen to, who do I not want in the room with me. How often do I want to be medicated? Yes, I want to be medicated. A lot of people don't. A lot of people, that's another one that's very uncomfortable for us. There's some folks who just don't want to be medicated for whatever reason. And you just see the pain in their faces. I don't want that. Make sure I'm not in any pain. And I just want for everyone to be telling wonderful stories. And I would like to hear laughter. And Elua's vision, which she talks about in her TED Talk, I also would love for people to clap and applaud my find. So that's what I want. And I actually have all that written out, and I highly recommend that folks do that. Write our own obituaries. Nobody tells our story better than we do ourselves. So if you haven't started to think about your obituary, it's never too early, and it's not a sad thing. It's a celebration of all of the wonderful things that you've done on this planet. So how about you, Natalie? What would you like to experience in your final days?
Oh, well, I love all of that. Of course, I want to die at Abode. That would be ideal. Gosh, anyone who's in the San Antonio area, please come by for a tour of Abode. It is magical. It just has this energy about it that is so comforting, both for the guests who stay there and the family and friends who visit. So I definitely would want that kind of place for my family and friends to make sure they have a full kitchen and wonderful staff and places to relax and restore, and that they can also leave me and know that I'm in good hands and I'm being well taken care of. And then my friend Colleen, who is also a death doula, She is a costume designer, and she is also very death positive. She's a death doula. She's all the things. She's fantastic. I want her to design my death shroud. So we were talking about what that might look like. And of course, it has to be fabulous. And I'm really into prints. As you probably can tell right now, I'm wearing a very bright print, but I love animal prints. So probably would have like animal prints on it and maybe some sequins, something really fancy and fantastic. And of course, it would open in the back, so it'd be very easy for me to slip in and out of and make it easy for the caregivers to tend to me. But then it would also be comfortable. And you know what, Mary? I better not be wearing a bra. Like, don't anybody put me in a bra. I'm like a Lua on this one. No bra, or I will come and haunt you. So I just want to be very comfortable. And then I really like the idea of, I'm really picturing a boat here. I want those big French doors to open to that outside garden and just feel the breeze and hear the laughter. And maybe people are outside. Maybe my dad's there with the guitar playing. People are singing and laughing and telling stories. And I'm just surrounded by all of this mirth and merriment. And I'm able to just take my final breaths that way. And that, the people that I love are around me. And maybe the ex-boyfriends that I don't necessarily want to see aren't there. But I like what you said about we also get to choose who we don't want in the room. So I think that's kind of funny.
Like, I want all the old boyfriends to come crawling back. I want to hear a lot of wailing and carrying on from those. No, I'm kidding.
I think that would be great. Yeah, yeah. I could help you. I could be your death doula for that, and I'll give them a call and say, okay, here's your chance. Your last chance. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so steps, like what are the steps? We want to work with the doula. I've already talked to Colleen and we're designing my death shroud. So, even though sometimes it feels really early to do this kind of thing and to think this way, I love your point. Like, just do it. Write your own obituary. A lot of times, I know like it's a good business tool when you go in for an interview to like write your announcement, like, hey, Natalie Buster just got the job of blah, blah, blah. And this is what she brings to the table. And these are all the wonderful things that she did. So it's a good business tool. And I think it's also a good death tool because, yeah, nobody tells your story as well as you do. So, yeah, that's a good idea to practice that. And a doula can help you with that. One thing that I'm getting better because I'm learning more as we keep diving into this topic with all of our trainings, but all of the paperwork, like the advanced directives and all of that, how are you doing on that kind of planning?
Well, I'm all set as far as I know. For sure, with the advanced directive, that in essence tells what you want to have happen if you're dying. If you want to be resuscitated, the emergency response folks will come and bang on your chest to try to bring you back to life. It may be that you're so far along in your disease phase that you don't want that. You don't want somebody coming and busting up your ribs when you're already this close to death. So I do have a do not resuscitate that's in order. And you have to have that in order for folks not to do that to you. That's true in the hospital. And then outside the hospital, you need to have an out of hospital DNR. I have a will drawn up and a couple of other papers too around here. And they're all in the top drawer of my file cabinet. So if something happens to me, I know where they are.
Thank you. As your death doula, I appreciate that. I also like the 5 wishes. And in a future episode, we'll really go into advanced directives, but I think this is also great. It's available online. It's like $5 or there's a bulk discount if you buy a bunch of them. But it takes you through advanced directives, medical advanced directives, very specifically. So you can tell people in this, it asks questions like, who do I want in the room? Who don't I want in the room? Do I want to be massaged with essential oils? Yes or no? Like, I think it suggests some things that we might not think of on our own. So it's really great. This is a great place to start, I think, if you want to start thinking about that good death and what that might mean for you. And of course, an end of life doula would be also able to ask those questions and get you thinking deeply about that kind of thing. But then I also go, okay, so we planned our perfect death, right? And I want to be in the shroud designed by Colleen McCool, and I want, to be at ABODE. But what happens if I'm not? What happens if I'm in a hospital like my mom was? How can I create that good death, even if I'm not in the situation that I thought I was going to be? Trying to take elements from it. And I think if we communicate and tell our loved ones what we want, I bet they can bring in that guitar to the ICU. They can bring in some battery operated candles. They can bring in scarves. They can make it into a beautiful space and create that sacred space around us, even if we're not dying where we want to be dying. A lot of people prefer to die at home, but the reality is a lot of people tend to die in hospitals, and death becomes that medicalized event. But I think if we let people know beforehand, oh, how can we soften this experience? They can bring in those elements to make it less clinical.
I think that's a wonderful idea. We can be in control of a lot of things, not everything, but that's why we need help from our family and our friends at end of life. Folks who are just lone soldiers out there, it's more difficult for them because they don't have an advocate, they don't have a power of attorney or someone to help them, and there's a lot of folks like that in our world. So I'm all for being an independent person, but at some point, especially at end of life, we need each other.
Yeah, and being part of a community like Abode or other communities that are like this around the country, it's really nice to be able to find those people that you can trust with this information, and you trust that they'll carry it out whenever that day comes for you. You mentioned something really interesting, Mary, about medication. And I think, we don't have to go too deep into it, but what I wanted to kind of tease out from that was the education to family members and friends who might think that certain medications hasten death, that we don't want the person to get addicted. We've heard that with some end of life comfort medications that we can give also tend to be abused in other situations. And so how can we educate people on making sure that people are not in pain at the end of life?
Well, the instances we come across where the guest or their family refuses morphine because they're afraid that dad will get addicted to it. We have to just sit down with them and say, your dad's only going to be with us for a few weeks, a month or two at most. It's okay. This is, but if they had addiction problems in the past, it is really tricky. And again, it's up to us to think that through. If we have a fear of medicine, if we don't like the medicine, if we've had addictions in the past, can we make peace with those so that when we are dying and the medication is used properly, then we don't have to be in pain. And we can explain that, and we've had some people who still refuse. And I just wonder, like, do they feel like they deserve this pain at end of life? Do they feel like they did something bad and now they're punishing themselves? I don't know. I think about it a lot, but I don't have any real concrete answers to it. Sometimes families will say, could you please not give the pain medication until tonight because family are coming in from out of town today. And then we have to say, well, we can do that, but you sure run the risk of your loved one being in pain. Is that what you really want? So, yeah, it's just, as I said, when it's my time, just medicate me as much as is needed so that I can rest and let my body do what the body knows how to do.
Yeah, the body knows how to die, if we just get out of the way. But I think
The pain keeps us here. So the body knows what to do. But if it's in pain, it's one of those things that keeps us grounded when the body is trying to let go.
I love that feel, it's like food, water, pain are all physical elements of the body, and it tethers us to this earth. And if the soul is ready to go, it's going to be real hard if we're tethered in those ways. And I think, what this makes me think is we got to have those conversations early, because if you're having them in the moment, it's not necessarily going to get through. People have their ideas of these types of medications, and maybe when they're in tremendous grief and fear, and that's a hard time to educate them.
But it is the individual's decision, and we always respect and abide by what our guest wants.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We can have our own ideas about our own death and what's good for us. And then we let the guest lead the way for what's good for them. And that, I think, Mary, is a good death.
That's a good death. Death on our own terms. Well, Natalie, before I go, I think about this a lot, not about the old boyfriends, but before I go, I will curate a guest list for my pre-death and after-death party. I will have a list of folks that I would like to come and visit me in my final days. And you know what? It's going to be the same list of people I want to see while I'm alive.
Well, I better be on that list. I'm going to tell the bouncer. Before I go, I will learn how to better say ho'oponopono.
What was that? Sorry.
Ho'oponopono. And make sure that I tell people, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. So freeing, so beautiful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Before You Go, the official podcast of ABODE Contemplative Care for the Dying.
At ABODE, we believe that death is not a medical event. It's a very natural event. So therefore, we are not offering medical advice. We're simply sharing our experiences and knowledge with you before you go.
Make sure to visit us online at abodehome.org, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and while you're there, click that donate button to help us along. This podcast was edited by Make Your Day Richer.